Welcome to the Wall and Power Radio Hour. This is your host, Paul Metza. Peter Ostroushko was one of the finest musicians to ever come out of Minneapolis. We lost him at the age of 67 on February 24th. He was born in 1953 in northeast Minneapolis. He started playing mandolin at family gatherings at the age of 3 and later became extremely proficient on both the guitar and violin. He became a true self-taught virtuoso over the years. He came of age performing on the West Bank folk singing in the early 1970s and went on to become one of the first musicians to play on the Prairie Home Companion, which he did for years. His first big break was playing with Bob Dylan on Bob's best-selling record, Blood on the Tracks, in 1974, which was also Peter's first time in a recording studio. And over the years, Peter played with some of the finest musicians in both Minnesota and America, recording dozens of records and writing some incredible original music, and was featured prominently in several Ken Burns documentaries. Tonight we will be remembering Peter and speaking with two great Minneapolis musicians who knew him and played with him, Mr. Dakota Dave Hall and Tom Lieberman. First up, Dakota Dave Hall. Just featured a song called Ragtime Annie that featured Peter Ostroushko on mandolin along with Bob Douglas on mandolin as well, off Dave Hall's Victory record. Dakota Dave Hall is with us now. Dave, that was a great tune. It's a great record. And wasn't the incredible Doc Watson on that session as well?
He sure was. Yes, and hello, Paul.
Yeah.
He was here for that, and we were all blown away. Butch Thompson was there, Sean Blackburn, Barb Montoro, and I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody. Mike Cass,
sure,
dobro player. Yeah.
What year was that? What year was that, Dakota?
I'm wanting to say that was recorded in 78 or 79.
Okay.
That's my best recollection. I don't remember the exact dates that we recorded.
Well, it doesn't matter. The music is timeless. You were knocked out and blown away by having Doc Watson playing that record, but tell us about the first time you heard Peter Ostroushko play.
Oh man, that goes back into the Dark Ages practically. Again, I don't remember what year, but likely it would have been 73, maybe 74. I think it was at the New Riverside Cafe, but it might have been next door at the Extempore. A bunch of us were there playing. I think Robin Williams of Robin and Linda Williams. And I think Pop would have been there.
Pop
I was
Wagner.
there. Yeah. And this young guy came up carrying a fiddle case and asked if he could play along with us. And collectively, our jaws hit the floor. It was pretty amazing. That was my introduction to Peter Ostroushko. And it just, as I got to know him and was fortunate enough to play with him often through the years, he just got better and better. And not only that, but everybody that played with him, just by virtue of playing with him, played better.
Mm-hmm. And he was also, although in later years known for his mandolin and violin player, but he was a hell of a guitar player as well.
Oh, he's an incredible guitar player. He played everything, and he was, one of these ambidextrous guys.
Right.
And he was a marvelous guitar player. We played together for a year, traveled on the road together for a year, and a lot of what we did were sort of flat-picking guitar duets, playing in harmony and that sort of thing. And it was it was something to behold. You can hear some of that on his first couple of podcasts that he had put together over the last couple of years of performances on Prairie Home Companion.
Well, speaking of the Prairie Home Companion, you and Peter, and I believe Robin and Linda Williams, were the first guests on the first Prairie Home Companion, correct?
Not Robin and Linda, but Peter and I think Bill and Judy, Bill Hinckley and Judy Larson, were on the very first show, if memory serves. If we weren't on the very first show, we were on one of the very first shows.
And how long?
And we were on that first year a lot.
How long do you have any idea how long Peter played with the Prairie Home Companion? Because he was one of the house musicians for years.
Yeah, well, and he kept coming back in guest status, too. So I think he was a regular all the way through. There may have been a 2 or 3 year hiatus in the middle somewhere, but all in all, if memory serves, he was on a lot all through the years.
When I was talking about Peter, when John Bream from the Star Tribune called me, asked how I felt about Peter's passing. Of course, it's just ripped a hole in all of our hearts. But I said, Peter, his virtuosity was only exceeded by his humility.
I think that's true. He really was truly a humble guy, and he was an interested guy. He was an interesting guy, too, but, if you were in a conversation with him, you had 100% of his attention during that conversation. And, he was the real deal. And, he also, I have to say, he was one of the hardest working musicians, if not the hardest working musician I've ever known in my life. He practiced and played constantly, and that's how he got that good.
Well, all you guys back then, you were all really good when you were really young, but when you guys started, when you came on my radar, it seemed like every time I heard you guys, whether it was you and Sean Blackburn or you and Peter or Peter with anybody else, every time I heard you guys always got better. It flew my mind how good you guys were.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
That's the idea. I think you want to feel like you're learning and getting better and all that. And as soon as you stop, that process of figuring out new things and learning new things, then you might as well hang it up, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Now, what was it like just traveling with Peter? Because you guys did quite a bit of touring in the Northeast and all around the upper Midwest. What was it just like hanging out, traveling in the car? Was he a quiet guy? Was he funny?
Well, we didn't have a car. When we went Northeast, we traveled by Greyhound bus.
Okay, better yet.
Believe it or not.
Founded in Hibbing,
really early.
Founded in Hibbing, Minnesota, by the way. Greyhound bus.
I think I knew that at one point, but I forgot.
Yeah, now you know again.
But we were doing a lot of college gigs, college coffee houses, stuff like that, which were a thing in those days. Of course, they're not so much anymore.
Right.
But in those days, you could go to a college and you might stay there and do 3 nights of shows for people, and then move on to the next gig, which was a very civilized way of doing things. You'd get to know people a little bit, and
get to see the town.
So we had an awful lot of fun, playing for people and playing for young, guitar players and so forth, and really, I think that was the spot where we both kind of honed the stagecraft too, of learning how to be on stage, talk to people, put together a set, all those skills that you aren't born with.
Now, tell us a little bit about how green those pastures were on the West Bank folk and blues scene when you guys were starting to perform in the early to mid 70s.
Well, that was a really remarkable scene in many ways. There were already a lot of marvelous musicians on the scene. But I think the thing that I remember the most about that was the sense of camaraderie that we all had. The fact that we met lifelong friends on that scene, on that corner, people that, I knew Peter for almost 50 years.
Wow.
Sean Blackburn, people like Dean Carr, who has also left, and
Dean.
Other folks, Bob Bovey, Bob Douglas, Pop Wagner, that have, been really lifelong friends. Maureen McKeldery, folks that and we were sort of had a sense of we were all in this together. And, the coffee houses in those days, the Extemp for sure, and places in other cities were similar in that they had more than a concert hall. They had a lot of rooms aside from that, and so you could grab a cup of coffee and get with another musician or two and show each other the licks that you'd figured out on a particular day or whatever you wanted to do, and it really was a highly creative, highly learning place.
A golden time. We've got Dakota
really
Dave.
A golden time.
Yeah,
we were just lucky.
Dakota Dave Hall, I am so glad you were able to take time with us to talk about the great Peter Ostroushko and the great days of which you came up. And we're going to have Dave on for another set, so stick around.
Did you know that learning a musical instrument is good for your brain? For adults, it can lead to improvements in working memory, resilience to age-related hearing loss, and lower levels of stress and depression. According to University of Texas research, it's even more effective than brain training games. And the best part is, it's fun! Even if you've never played an instrument, we'll have you playing songs in a month. You may think of School of Rock as a place for kids, but we have lessons for adults, too. School of Rock Eden Prairie offers lessons on guitar, bass, drums, keyboards, and vocals. You choose whether your lessons are in person or online. We also have adult bands if you want to jam with other adults. And AM 950 listeners get 10% off 45 or 60-minute weekly lessons. Visit EdenPrairie.schoolofrock.com or click on the link on am950radio.com.
I'll grab my gal and we'll drive down the lane. We'll find that gang right soon. Wanna hear that fiddle play and watch the folks get happy in a state where people say, please pass the biscuits, Pappy. I wanna feel that hillbilly swing under a southern moon.
Welcome back to the second set of the Wall of Power Radio Hour. This is your host, Paul Metsa. We just heard Hillbilly Swing by my guest, Dakota Dave Hall. Sean Blackburn was singing that. The great Peter Ostroushko was playing fiddle from their record, Ace Pickin' and Sweet Harmony. Dakota Dave, let's talk a little bit about another great musician we lost many years ago, Sean Blackburn, your partner for years. Just one of the best singers I ever heard.
Yeah, I miss that guy.
What a great singer.
He really was. He was also a heck of a guitar player.
And he did.
He doesn't get credit, but
and
he really was.
He did rope tricks too, didn't he?
Yep, he did. He did. Rope tricks, stage class. And he after we stopped playing together, he got more and more involved in sort of the Western music scene, which included rope tricks and all of that, and really was singing right up until his early death.
You know, when I went to his memorial, I remember Peter Ostroushko playing a solo version with a little help from my friends, the Beatles song, on mandolin.
Yep.
And it was there wasn't a dry eye in the house.
No kidding. I know. And there were so many great performances that day, and that one certainly stood out. So many of them did.
You know, I remember the story because Sean became at some point quite a horse rider at some point, and I remember them telling the story about he used to have his horse when he lived in Colorado, and he'd always go up and ride his horse in the morning into the mountains, and he would stash his coffee cup and start a little fire and have coffee. And I always envision, when I think about Sean, I envision him doing that. And I've always wanted to write the song, and you and I are neighbors, and we have to do it. We need to write the song called Blackburn's Cup.
That's a good title.
Don't you think?
That's a very good title. Yeah.
You know, you and I were chatting a few weeks ago before Peter passed. I'm working on a project to get some info on Peter. And we were talking about we were surrounded by such great musicians. You got into town a little bit before me. As I kept thinking about it, Dave, I remember the scene, like, for example, in the West Bank, whether it was Palmer's or the Extemp or the New Riverside or the 400, you would tell people, I'm going to see Dave Ram. Yeah, Dave's playing with Tony. I'm going to see John Kerner. I'm going to see Sean and Dave. I'm going to see Bill and Judy. Everybody was on a first-name basis back then. Even if you didn't know the musicians, it was just that so collegial and so friendly.
Yep. I mean, that was, I think, the lucky thing for us was we were all, if a new gig showed up, people didn't sort of hoard that stuff. They shared the news, hey, there's a gig, you can get a set over at this joint. It pays a little bit, there was a bar on Lake Street that was a 4 sets a night bar, but they, for a while, were dividing it up between 4 musicians. So you could go over there and you'd make $10 for doing one set of music.
Right.
You know, and that was golden in those days.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that'd be like $50 today.
Right. For one set.
For one set.
Yeah.
And, you know, people could have, I suppose, kept that to themselves, kept it on the down low, but they didn't.
You know,
and so there was a real sense of sharing and camaraderie that I don't know if we see as much of it these days.
well, the other element to the whole scene was so many of you guys. There was, of course, Belleville and Hoffman on Franklin Avenue for years. I have a 12-string made by Rod Belleville, but Charlie Hoffman, one of the greatest acoustic luthiers, guitar makers in the country, made guitars for so many of you guys. You have a Hoffman, Larry Long has a Hoffman, Charlie McGuire has a Hoffman. I believe Peter had a Hoffman.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Peter did not, but he certainly had instruments that had been worked on. He had a Belleville for a while.
Okay.
I don't know what happened to that guitar, but I know he had one for a while.
Tell us a little bit about Charlie Hoffman, because that was another element that was really kind of part of our scene. I had a lot of stuff worked done over at that shop, and it was a great place to hang. You could go over there. I'd bump into you over there. We could pick a little bit. Occasionally, you'd bump into Leo Kotke. It was like a really fun place. You never knew who you were going to bump into.
That's true. And, of course, they kept our instruments together for us.
Yes.
And, you know, that was a huge deal. And we all went in there to, you know, to have things repaired and have things looked at. That was just the nature. And, of course, there was the podium in Dinkytown,
exactly.
too. And which was another place that was sort of a hangout as well as a music store. And it was really a magical time. I think the epicenter would have been the Extempore.
Right. Which
they
used
because you could
they
perform there, but also just hang out there.
Well, yeah, and it was also the Extemp, and then next door, the new Riverside Cafe, which on their monthly calendars used to refer to themselves as the biomagnetic center of the universe.
That's right, and that's why there were so many wonderful guitar players in Minnesota, because it's the biomagnetic center of the universe.
Oh, for sure. We've got Dakota Dave Hall on sharing his memories of Peter Ostroushko in the West Bank. You can find out more about Dakota Dave Hall on his website, dakotadavehall.com. We got just a few seconds left. Tell us about these. You do a couple live streams a week, Dave. Tell us about those.
I do, yeah. Every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday for the next little while, for sure. I just this morning did my 138th show.
Wow! And
they're just little 3-song mini concerts, and I do those every week. 3 times a week.
And you can get them on dakotadavehall.com, and if you're a Facebook friend, you can see them on Facebook as well.
You don't have to even be a friend on Facebook. There's a group, Dakota Dave Hull's live streams on Facebook, and you can go there, and there's all the information you'd want, probably more than you need.
Dakota Dave Hull, thank you for sharing these memories. And
my pleasure.
When things lighten up, let's have a little yard time, as we're neighbors there in the bucolic Northeast Minneapolis. Thank you, David.
What a great idea.
Yeah, have a great night.
All right. Thanks for having me on, Paul. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Take care.
You too.
All righty.
Welcome to the third set of the Wall and Power Radio Hour. This is your host, Paul Metza. My guest right now is a man that knew Peter Ostroushko for years and years and years and had the pleasure of playing and recording with him. Tommy Lieberman is one of my oldest buddies in Minneapolis. I moved to Ridgewood Avenue in 1978 because I knew one man in Minneapolis, and he lived on Ridgewood, and we've been friends and worked together ever since. Tommy, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, Paul. I'm doing well, buddy. How are you?
Good. We're getting older together.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Yeah, it is good.
I'll take it, considering the alternatives.
Yes. Well, tell us a little bit about the first time you heard and met Peter Ostroushko.
Yeah, well, I would say the first time I heard Peter was very likely when he was playing with Dakota Dave Hall at the Coffee House Extempore, which was sort of my entree to the West Bank, playing open stages at the Extempore. And Peter had, as I'm sure other people have mentioned, and anyone who knew him would tell you, he sort of had this countenance. I kind of considered him sort of the bluegrass Buddha. You know, he was this,
Right.
he was this kind of presence. You know, he
Yeah.
was quiet.
Yeah.
He let his music do the talking, and when he talked, he didn't waste words. Very very much like his music, he wasn't wasteful of it. He was very respectful of it. And anyway, so he and Dave together were playing. Dave, of course, being the great guitarist, and Peter, likewise a great guitarist. So when they would do duets, that was astounding. And then Peter would pick up the fiddle, and it was amazing. They'd pick up the mandolin, and it was all even more so amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
just kind of these layers of amazement kind of coming from this center of calm. Dave is a man of, who likes to tell a story, as did Peter, but Dave was more the loquacious one of the two. He would sort of set up the songs, and he would do the intros and the patter, whereas Peter just he was an equal, of course, in the act, but he kind of laid back almost like a sideman would and let Dave do the talking.
Mm-hmm.
So Peter always had this thing where you kind of had to meet him on his ground. You know, you
Right.
didn't want to put him off. But he had a way of kind of leveling you with silence, or leveling you with silence.
Right.
Because as you could tell, I'm not very good at silence. But he could do that, and Dave and Peter were they were the gold standard, for the people playing traditional music. Peter was. I recall that the talk about Peter at the time. I had just gotten my driver's license, and I was coming down to the Extempore for open stages, and in my my blue Dodge Dart, which I wish I still had.
Hey, I had.
Anyway.
I didn't know we had this in common. I inherited my grandmother's
You had
yellow
a Swinger, though.
Yellow dot. Well, it was Dodge Dart Swinger with the black hard.
Yeah,
top.
it was. It was a 2-door. Yeah, right. I had the 4-door.
That's why they called it a Swinger.
Right. So as you can appreciate,
I
my Dodge Dart would get me down to these open stages,
Sure.
and I was just I was really too young to be there, but nonetheless I was there, and meeting this guy Peter and hearing him play, and the talk about Peter was that he was impossibly young to be playing like that,
Mm-hmm.
which I think that certainly was true when he was 19 or 20, and then he just kept growing up, and he was still impossibly young to be
Yeah.
playing whatever he was playing, because he was kind of ageless. He was kind of this eternal old soul kind of person.
Right.
And I couldn't tell you that Peter, over the course of the many years that I knew him, and obviously there are people who were far closer to him than I, but we were friends and hung out quite a bit. But I don't think he changed much at all over the years. I mean, he just got better. He just kind of became more and more of who he was. It's not like he cut and run in another direction. He just kind of continued to deepen, and that was kind of an ageless sort of quality, which to me he always had. But the line was that he was this kind of impossibly young prodigy, which he certainly was at the time, and then I think he just sort of grew into his talent.
Well, let's not sell yourself short, Tommy Lieberman, because when I started, Tom Lieberman became on my radar, you were opening shows for guys like Doc Watson, and I believe you showed up with your guitar at a Brownie McGee and Sonny Terry gig, and Brownie asked you to either, was it sit in on stage or sit in backstage, or but you were only, you're an 18-year-old white guy. I mean, you were good too, really good.
Well, thank you. Brownie McGee and Sonny Terry. My dad was into Sonny and Brownie, which of course got me into them, and he had a couple of their records, and I remember they were playing the whole coffee house, and my friend Billy Smith, Waylon Willie on the harmonica. Sure. Billy, big Sonny Terry fan, and Billy was was working at the Hole at the time, and he said, Tommy, you might want to come down and I'm happy to get you backstage, introduce you to Brownie. And we met and played some backstage, and then he and Sonny were nice enough to bring me up, and then they'd come through town and we'd play. That was what an experience. Those were Brownie's dashiki years, I think you can remember. But I remember Brownie was playing a guitar. He was playing this. It was a Martin. It was like a D18, like right. A nice old D18 that had been given to him. It was a gift that he had been given by Andy Griffith.
Wow.
Which I thought was just weird, but somehow wonderful. And so Sonny and Brownie, they came out of North Carolina and worked their way to New York City, where they did all sorts of crazy things. I think Brownie was in the original cast of Porgy and Bess, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think he played the Sporting Life character. So, those guys had all sorts of stories. But yes, so.
Well.
But I was a baby.
Yeah,
of course I was a baby. I was just lucky to be in the room.
You've aged well, Tom Lieberman. Tell us about, now you were on some of the early Prairie Home Companion shows too, weren't you?
Well, yeah, and I was trying to recall specifically, I don't know in some of your other conversations if this could be clarified, but I was invited into a musicians co-op called the June Apple Musicians Co-op. And Dakota Dave was a big part of that, as were Pop Wagner and Bob Bovey and Bob Douglas, Maureen McKeldery, Jerry Rao, Sean Blackburn. I'm sure others that had preceded my involvement and others that I'm probably forgetting. But, all these guys and women were, they were just like older siblings, really, to me. They were just so accepting. And I think Peter was probably in the co-op at one time. If not, he was, very, very close to those players, of course. And so anyway, I was in this group of guys. And we would share booking information and gigs and promo and stuff like that. And again, I was just so happy to be involved with these guys, and they were so helpful and supportive. And around that time, this is probably 73, 74, and Garrison was starting to mine the West Bank folky community and putting them on stage. And a lot of those guys that I just mentioned had become the Powder Milk Biscuit Band or the New Prairie Ramblers or any number of other sort of iterations of the Prairie Home House Band. So I think what happened was that it just kind of became, it was sort of a matter of time that I finally met, I was introduced to Garrus in, I think, 75 or 76 was my first time on the show.
Now,
and they just sort of got it. He finally got around to me, I guess.
Yeah, well, you were an incredible musical force at that time, as you still are. Tell us a little bit about how you stumbled on a Tim Sparks and Prudence Johnson and Vuela Rio Nito was formed.
Well, again, like so much of the story here, it all happened at the Extempore or somewhere on the West Bank. I do remember specifically the first time I ran into Sparks. I was upstairs at the Extempore. The music room had moved upstairs, And it was sort of there was a big room, lobby room out in front of the music room itself. And there was this guy who had a kind of this, I don't know what exactly you would call his mustache, but he had like a soul patch and a mustache.
Right.
And he was wearing a big brown Homburg hat and playing a color coordinated Martin 0017, little brown mahogany Martin, and just finger picking the hell out of this thing. I mean,
right.
You heard Tim back then, but he was playing some old Jelly Roll Morton and James P. Johnson, basically stride piano arrangements, reimagined for finger picking guitar. And just to get totally esoteric, there were people that were starting to do that, and kind of the finger style tradition of the Merle Travis, Chet Atkins kind of guys.
Mm-hmm.
But people like Guy Van Duzer and Duck Baker and Tim Sparks were taking that to the next level. And I think it was Van Duzer who called it stride guitar. And with finger picking, it's kind of a weird name for it. But the thumb of the picking hand is going back and forth in this alternating bass, which is basically filling the role that the left hand plays on the piano in stride and boogie woogie, where it's kind of got this big alternating bass line. But it was in the guitar, it's handled by the thumb. So Tim was, what he would do is he'd slow down these old piano roll recordings of these stride and boogie woogie players, and he'd just figure them out note for note and arrange them for guitar. And so he was just sitting there playing this stuff, and it's like, what on earth? What fresh hell have I stumbled into here? And just so taken by it that we started, started hanging out with him, playing with him, trying to learn from him. Which I'm still doing to this day, just trying to keep up and learn with him, learn from him. But so it was that kind of thing. So Tim was just this curiosity, and no one really knew what to make of him. But we shared a real love for that era of music, particularly, and that was sort of where his head was at that time. And I think he had done a gig or two with Prudence, so knew her as a vocalist, and we started getting into sort of the vocal harmony groups of the early 20th century. Kind of the Boswell Sisters was sort of our big meeting spot. Boswell Sisters being this kind of eccentric harmony group of the 20s. And then we explored, we kind of got it. It started to cool into sort of the swing and bop era stuff, and I guess, we would get into Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross stuff of the 50s and 60s, and then it kind of got into more of a bebop sensibility, which was very cool. It wasn't really where I was necessarily coming from, but it's all good. So that Tim basically brought me in and brought Prudence in and brought the three of us together, and that was the original Rio Nito. And then I left that group in '80 after I Like to Riff, and went off to find myself in other ways, and happy to say that we're all still friends and we're playing together again. So about 5 years ago, we bootlegged I Like to Riff and re-released it.
Good for you.
We bootlegged our own record.
Stole your own record. That's my
right.
kind of hero. Tommy, we're going to listen to a great track at the end of this set called Hannah from Savannah that Peter plays on with Rio Nito from the record I Like to Riff. Now, you were friends with Peter for going on, 45, 50 years.
I guess.
And I say in a very sad way, we almost, we lost Peter twice, because we lost him when he had a stroke and when we found out he'd never play again. I mean, I'm still not over that personally. And he and I weren't that close, but we'd worked together, we'd recorded together. But I just bowed down to that guy as one of Minnesota's great virtuosos. So what was, you talked about, the early years with Peter, and we're going to listen to some music you recorded with him. What was it like getting to know Peter in the later years, pre-stroke, after the stroke, and towards the end there, and talk about his great podcast, too? Yeah,
I'm not sure I'm the greatest authority. Peter Peter had so many collaborators and people who really spent time with him. I consider myself more just to have been lucky to have touched his orbit at a few points in my life. Through Prairie Home and with Rio Nito. But we were friends, and I really think about, the old days when I was a little bit before I was actually legally able to drink in the 400, but that apparently did not slow me down much. And I can think of many afternoons playing pinball in the back of the 400 with Peter, and just having a great time, just chilling, just hanging out.
Yeah.
And we didn't, it's not like we were having any deep conversations. We were just playing pinball and having a nice time. And Peter always struck me as somebody who had a very, very good, strong, centered sense of self. I think Peter knew who he was, and that really gave him a lot of strength. His upbringing, his proud Ukrainian background, his proud roots in Northeast. It's not like, as I say, you never really wondered which Peter was going to show up. It was always the same guy.
Yeah.
And he was always considerate. He was always kind, and he was always a lot of fun. He was one of the funniest people in the world. But of course, his humor was kind of surgical. He would like choose his moment, and then he would just go in there and make that perfect cut.
Like playing a great solo. Tommy Lieberman, this has been really great. Thank you for sharing your memories of Peter and those great times. We're going to listen to Hannah from Savannah off Tommy's record. I Like to Riff with Prudence Johnson, Tim Sparks, their band called Rio Nito, and that will be Peter Ostroushko.
My baggage, nothing in it but the blues. Gonna throw away my derby, gonna throw away my shoes, 'cause I'll never roam away from home a solitary day. When I get back to Hannah in Savannah, GA. Get a one-way ticket if I got to steal the dough. You can clip my wings and keep them, I don't need them anymore, 'cause I never roam away from home a solitary day. When I get back to Hannah in Savannah, GA. Never know how much I miss you. You never know. Oh, Hannah, this man of yours is blue. This man of yours, he's really got the blues.
Did you know that learning a musical instrument is good for your brain? For adults, it can lead to improvements in working memory, resilience to age-related hearing loss, and lower levels of stress and depression. According to University of Texas research, it's even more effective than brain training games. And the best part is, it's fun! Even if you've never played an instrument, we'll have you playing songs in a month. You may think of School of Rock as a place for kids, but we have lessons for adults, too. School of Rock Eden Prairie offers lessons on guitar, bass, drums, keyboards, and vocals. You choose whether your lessons are in person or online. We also have adult bands if you want to jam with other adults. And AM 950 listeners get 10% off 45 or 60-minute weekly lessons. Visit EdenPrairie.schoolofrock.com or click on the link on AM950radio.com.
Thanks for listening to the Wall of Power Radio Hour. The show is produced by Paul Metza, engineered by Patrick Lilia. We'd like to thank our guests Dakota Dave Hall and Tom Lieberman. If you're looking to buy a house in Northeast Minneapolis, I'm selling my duplex. Get a hold of me at paul@paulmetza.com. And like my dad used to tell me, remember to be kind and make someone happy.